I'm Adolph Oliver, and in this lesson we're going to talk about simple order of operations problems. One of the things going on with this is that a lot of you have learned the PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, which if not interpreted correctly, has you do the wrong things. Let me just remind you what the PEMDAS is. Parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. One of the problems with PEMDAS is that some of these things are of the same importance, like multiply and divide, and when you guys learn this, you always assume you multiply first before you divide, which is absolutely incorrect. Let's take a look at a better way of looking at the order of operations, and then I'll show you the correct way of interpreting it. First off, of course, we're supposed to do anything that is in what are known as grouping symbols, and the most common one of these grouping symbols, of course, is the parens. But besides parens, it also includes the square guys and the curly brackets. Here you are. So all of those are grouping symbols, and anything inside of those you have to do first. Next in importance, we have powers, exponents, if you want to think of them that way. And the one thing that PEMDAS leaves out, but some of you are familiar with square roots and things of that sort, they're equal in importance with powers. Next comes multiply and divide. And then lastly, in the order of operations, add and then subtract. Now, here's the idea in the order of operations. You proceed from one level to the next. In other words, you work your way down in this whole list. But what PEMDAS leaves out is that the guys at each level are of exactly the same importance. For instance, multiply and divides you do at the same level. So if you have a whole bunch of multiplies and divides, what you do is you work from left to right. That's the part that's left out on PEMDAS. So a very important thing here to understand about all this, and that is at each level, okay, at each level, work from left to the right. Okay, so let's go up here. Anything in grouping symbols, and they could be the parens, the square guys, or the curly guys here. Any one of these three, you would have to do what's inside of them first. Once you get that down to a single number, then you move on. Next would be powers and roots, okay, indicated by exponents over here in PEMDAS. Then multiply and divide, and that's what PEMDAS doesn't point out too well. If you learn that multiplies and divides are of the same importance, and you work from left to right on these, then you're correct. The same thing, of course, happens officially with add and subtract down here. You're supposed to go left to right with those as well. So it's much better to learn the order of operations, how it officially goes here. Grouping symbols, powers and roots, next level, multiply and divide after that, finally add and subtract. And the key here, at each level, if you've got a bunch of multiplies and divides, you work from left to right, meaning if there's a divide on the left, you do that divide first. Okay, well, let's now look at some beginning problems here that aren't too complicated, but will require you to know the correct method of using the order of operations. Okay, here's our first example. 2 times 5 plus 4. Well, we remember that multiplication is higher in importance than addition, so the first thing we'd have to do is this multiply. 2 times 5 is 10. Now, it's best in the order of operations to do things one step at a time, so anything in the original problem that you haven't used, copy it back down. The plus and the 4 we didn't use, so there it is. Now, there's only one operation left to do. It's an add. When you have one thing left to do, you don't need the order of operations. The order of operations tells you what to do. If you've got a bunch of possible things to do, when you get down to one, just do it. 10 plus 4, 14. That's what the value is of that first expression. Okay, here we go. Now, this is one that brings home the PEMDAS difference right here. Okay, you do not do the multiply first. Multiply and divide here are of exactly the same importance. So you go from left to right. The guy on the left happens to be the division. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Now copy down what you haven't used, the times and the 5. 2 times 5 is 10. So remember, multiply and divide are of the same importance. When you have a bunch of those to do, and we have 2 of them here, 1 of each, you work left to right because multiply and divide are exactly the same level of importance. You have to go left to right. Okay, well, let's look at another candidate here. Here we have an addition, 2 plus 8 divided by 4. Well, multiply and divide is higher than add and subtract, so we'd have to do the division first here. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Copy down the guys that we haven't used. Here they are. And of course, we only have one thing left to do. 2 plus 2 ends up giving me 4. There's our final answer. Now, let's take a look at what happens when we've got some parens involved. Okay, well, here's a set of parens. We've got a subtraction right here and this set of parens. And the parens does not have a single number inside. That means there's something to do. Now, officially, when you run in the parens and you have to do something inside of it, you may have a bunch of things in here to do. What you do is you cover up everything else. Just look at what's inside that parens right there, and you reapply the order of operations. Well, in this case, there's only one thing inside the parens, so that's the only thing we need to do. The 3 minus 2, or 3 minus 1, I should say, gives 2. And so here it is. The 2 is a value in the parens. Copy the guys in front that you haven't used. Okay, well, once you get a single number inside the parens, then there's nothing else to do inside. When we have something to do inside the parens, there's some operation, some math operation to do, then we have to do it before we go on because parens, the grouping symbols that it belongs to, are of higher importance than anything else. Okay, well, we've got what's in the parens down to a single number. Now the only thing in front of that is a minus sign, so that indicates that all that's happening here is we're subtracting this 2. So we end up now with 3 minus 2, the final answer here being 1. Well, here's another example of having parens. And notice that when we take a look at what's in this problem, we've got parens right here, and then we've got a multiply. Well, there's not a single number inside this parens, so that means that what we have to do is work on what's inside the grouping symbol first. There's only one thing. 5 plus 6 is 11. So what we end up with here is 11 inside the grouping symbol, and then times 2. Well, we don't have anything else here, just 11 times 2. Simply, we end up then with 22. Now, let's take a look at an exponent. Okay, here we go. We've got 5 squared minus 3. Well, exponents or powers are right underneath the grouping symbols in importance, way above subtraction. So we have to, of course, do the power first. Remember how powers work. The 2 up here means there are 2 5s multiplying each other. So 5 squared can be thought of as 5 times 5, which is just 25. Copy down what we haven't used. Here it is, the minus and the 3. Now there's only one thing left to do, so we do that. 25 minus 3 gives me 22. Now, here's a combination of parens and an exponent. And again, follow the order of operations carefully here. Parentheses, grouping symbols are at the highest level. The powers are next down from it. So that means that we have to do anything inside grouping symbols first, and after that we do the power. So the requirement here, first do what's inside. There's only one operation here. It's a subtraction. 4 minus 2 gives me 2. So what's inside the parens is a 2. And of course now what we haven't used yet is that power 3, so be sure and indicate it. Well, now there's only one thing left to do, 2 cubed, which means that we've got a total of 3 of these 2's. 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 3 2's all multiplying each other. 2 times 2 is 4, times the third one, we end up with 8, and there's our final answer. Well, you'll be seeing much more complicated versions of order of operations later, but for the time being, the basics here are important, particularly, of course, knowing that when you have multiplies and divides, they're of the same importance and you have to work left to right. Okay, here we have an addition, but we also have a power. Once again, the power is higher in importance than the addition is, so by the order of operations, we have to do any powers or exponents first. 4 squared, of course, means 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Copy down those parts you haven't used, the plus sign and the 2 in front of it. Now, of course, there's only one thing left to do, and when you only have one thing, again, you don't need the order of operations. 2 plus 16 gives the final answer, being 18.